Eric Garner's nephew just got shot in a Brooklyn housing project. But the reason we're telling you about this story more than just another shooting is he is taking a shot at the city and getting ready to sue the city, not because a police officer shot him, but because he says the city could not keep him safe. Could he have a case? Then Joyce Mitchell, as you know, she's going to prison after she admitted to helping those two convicted killers break out of the prison she was working at. She could be out in as little as 2 years. Do you think she got off easy? Also, a judge just dropped 2 bribery charges against Senator Bob Menendez, but he's still under indictment for corruption. Are those dropped charges telling us something about the government's case? Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us this Wednesday night. Now, we're going to start with an explosion of gun violence in Chicago. It's become an all too familiar pattern. The city experienced its deadliest month in more than a decade, and it has seen 2 straight weekends with more than 50 people shot. Here is what Mayor Rahm Emanuel had to say about the troubling situation.
I'm going to try to control my anger. We have way too many guns on the streets of the city of Chicago with too little values and the penalties that don't match the values of the city of Chicago.
The FBI just released crime stats showing Chicago had more murders than New York last year, even though the city's substantially smaller. And its rate of gun violence is also a heck of a lot higher. But one shooting in New York is getting a ton of attention. I want you to put this in context to cities across this country, if this case, depending on how it's adjudicated. Eric Garner's nephew, Jonathan Brown. He was recently shot during a robbery at a Coney Island housing complex. He's now getting ready to sue the city as well as the housing authority, claiming that they knew about the dangerous conditions like inadequate security but failed to fix them. Let's bring in our panel to weigh on this first topic and many more. Jimmy Caceres, criminal defense attorney in Manhattan. He sits on the board of directors of the New York City Criminal Bar Association. He frequently lectures at both New York Law School and the bar associations in Queens and New York City, and has been known to go across the pond as well to lecture. Doug Von Oist, the founding partner of Carson Von Oist, focusing on corporate misconduct, was selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the nation. After this week, probably the Legal 50 or something here. Maybe in the top 5, Jimmy. Mayo Bartlett, he's an attorney at the law offices of Mayo Bartlett PLLC and former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office. And I start with you, Mayo, which is, we've seen obviously a lot of high-profile violence cases, and usually when there's a suit against the city, it's because someone in authority, most likely law enforcement, was involved in a controversial shooting. Okay, this one's different. This is a person shot, an innocent bystander by all accounts, shot by someone else that had no connection to the city whatsoever, but was a violent crime where a person that was caught in the crossfire. Well, let's just say it seems that way, at least on the surface of it. But he's not suing the shooter. He's suing the city because of the environment it created. Does this feel a little bit like the expectation the city has to be like the Minority Report, where they have to assume crime before it happens? Or what should the legal expectation of a person be when you can't foresee things like random shootings?
I think that it's a little bit of both. I think they have an uphill battle because you have to show that the city had a special duty to him as an individual and that they breached that duty. That's a very, very difficult standard. It's almost impossible. The big strong point for them, at least in terms of even trying to move forward with this case, is if you can show that this is a result of some slowdown by the police, let's say in retaliation for protests, something like that, where they maybe cut the people who were there and they stopped doing things that they knew they should have done, then you can maybe try to articulate it. But I think even then, you have to show that those officers had a special duty, that the police department, it's not even a particular officer, that New York City and the police department had a particular duty to this individual, that they anticipated that he was going to be shot.
And that they consciously decide not to do it, right?
Absolutely. For instance, they see someone robbing him and they run away and leave him there, that kind of thing.
You know, Jimmy, though, and again, you, like Mayo and Doug here, have been on both sides of this, from the prosecution, working for a DA, and then also now on the criminal defense side. Could I make an argument to say, listen, I'm a taxpayer in New York City. I'm living in an area where it's the OK Corral with gunfights almost every night. And there doesn't seem to be enough done to mitigate this, to protect either security for the people in the location I live or in the streets that I walk. Why should I have some expectation of safety? You may not have pulled the trigger, but you're not changing the environment that I have a right to live in and expect that I can come home at night safely. This isn't a random once-in-a-while shooting. I mean, take Chicago, for example. You want to make the best case argument. 50 people a weekend, right? If you live in the wrong zip code, should that be your expectation of safety?
I think it is an uphill battle, and I think that what you're talking about is just the guttural response that we all may have, but it just may not be the legal standard. You know, the New York Police Department can only do so much, and I suppose their argument's going to be, this happens all the time at this particular place, you have notice of it, you should be paying special attention to it. But again, it's an uphill battle because they have to show that they knew about it and either refused to pay attention to it or consciously disregarded what was in front of them. It's how we feel about a situation as citizens might be different from the legal standard in court.
You know, Doug, I agree with both these guys. It makes sense to me. I mean, there's standards you have a right to expect, but then there's some that are just, I mean, what if budgets are cut here? I mean, won't that be mitigating factors or whatever else the case may be? Explain to me, there's another case like this we'll get into later in the program. How does this get on the docket that's going to take the court's time, that when we all know at the end of the day, law doesn't support the claim that's being made? I know anybody can sue anybody.
But I disagree with that a little bit here. I don't think it's my understanding that this occurred on like city property. Mm-hmm. If the city knows that these things are going on their property, they have to keep the people there safe.
Public housing for the folks.
Public housing. So if they know that there's illegal activity, guns being fired, they're on notice. And if this person is, you know, lives there, has an expectation of having a safe place to live in, and the city's not properly policing it and doing what they do to make it safe, I kind of disagree.
Okay, but isn't there a difference, Doug, that if the elevator's out of commission and they don't fix it for 6 months and some person falls down an empty shaft, elevator shaft, that, you know what, that's different. That's negligence. You know, this is city property and they didn't take care of a building and that was a foreseeable tragedy that happened because they didn't maintain it. This one, you're asking them to anticipate a random violent act that a non-city representative was involved in and that they're culpable for that person's actions.
No, they're asking for a safe place. If there's violent activity going on in a place that the city knows about it, they need to put a police officer there. They need to do what's right for the people that live there. They have a right to live in a place that's safe. Well, you can't stop an individual, maybe that individual, but if you know that somebody is going to come there with a gun and endanger somebody, you have to do something about it.
We don't know just what they were doing. I mean, we don't know the facts.
Yeah.
I mean, if in fact they knew that it was a dangerous place, and if in fact there were extra police officers committed to this project, but they weren't at that particular location when that robbery occurred, I really don't see how you can establish liability. I mean, you need to create as safe a place as is reasonable, but when you have a housing complex that encompasses several blocks and you have police patrols pretty much all over the place, you're doing what's reasonable. You're doing all that can be expected. I mean,
I guess that's the facts. I guess you're right.
We need to know what they were doing.
And the case law is going to be very, very strongly against them.
And if for any reason they make headway on this case here, the plaintiffs, do you imagine what's going to happen in cities across America?
It's so hard.
This could have huge precedent. Okay. When we come back, we'll get to a story here that had dominated headlines for so long, and finally we have a sentence. Joyce Mitchell, she the woman who admitted that she helped those convicted killers escape from prison, but she actually still had the nerve to ask the judge for no jail time. An ankle bracelet, she said, will do the trick. She cried, she pleaded. End of the day, judge said, nice try, but you're still going away. But the max that he could sentence to is 7 years in prison. That could mean at the end of the day only 2 years behind bars. Did all the blubbering actually help or hurt her case, and was justice served?